Hey guys, welcome to the LT Brings the Heat podcast. We're your hosts, Sean Laird and Adam Heisler, where we talk about baseball and sports performance. With topics ranging from coaching, business, and player development, our goal is to bring you a no BS approach to development in baseball and sports performance. Hope you guys enjoy. Let's rock and roll. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of LT Brings the Heat. We're your hosts, Sean Laird and Adam Heisler. We got an awesome episode today. We kind of played this towards the end of the last episode. We're going to kind of talk about a little bit of visualization for young athletes and players, whether it comes to hitting, pitching. We're also going to kind of touch on the topic. It's very controversial of bullying and kids getting picked on a little bit. We kind of think this is something we need to address. And there's a lot of kids that go through this, if not all kids go through this at some point in time in their lives. But we want to kind of touch on these things today. But before we get going, how are you doing, Adam? How's Heisler Heat going right now?
Man, we're doing great down here, getting ready to get cranked up here before the season. But no, I'm excited about this episode because we speak about it all the time that we're much more than just baseball coaches. So having kids come in our facility and talk maybe about bullying and being bullied at school or being bullied at the ball field, it hits home because I think we've all been there before. And it's just a tough aspect that goes on in this society, especially even now it's gotten over to social media bullying too, which is something we'll touch on. But I'm super excited about the visualization stuff because it's kind of like the last missing key to all the physical activity that we talk about on here in the weight room and the weight training and the speed and everything else. It's now let's break down kind of how the mind is such an important aspect to being a great baseball player and a great athlete too. So what about you guys? Is it snowing up there yet or what?
Oh, man, actually, it's been kind of light this winter. I guess I don't want to say that out loud. I got to knock on some wood right now because it hasn't been like too crazy with snow. I think we had a couple of 4-inch snows, but nothing out of the ordinary. And this is weird, the older I get, which I think is the opposite for most people, the cold's not been bothering me as bad. I don't know why. I don't know if I'm adapting to it or what. I don't know how you could adapt to negative 20 real feel, which we get sometimes, but
yeah,
it's so far, it's been a pretty nice winter. I'm just excited for spring to come. We're only a couple months away. And as soon as we get to the middle into January, I just get super pumped for season and the spring training, MLB and all that good stuff. I'm pretty pumped for the most part. If I was living down where you are, I would already be pretty much ready to rock and roll.
You got that right. And like we were talking before we came on, the SEC and then also the Sun Belt Conference just announced that they're full go this baseball season. They're going to have a season. They're going to have midweek conference out of conference games as well as the conference games. So hopefully we're seeing some normalized baseball seasons coming back around this year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's with all the COVID stuff and everything, I think everybody's on the same page that we want to get back to some normalcy and let these kids have fun and play the game. And we're going to talk about bullying and mental health a little bit, but I'm a big advocate that these kids need to live their lives, and the mental health I think is more important than the risk that these young kids have nowadays. And that's just my opinion. So if anybody's listening has different, that's fine. That's just what I believe and what I see. But before we get going, Adam, let's talk about visualization. Let's talk about that first. So when kids are talking to you and asking you for advice, or they're asking for you to how to, make certain adjustments that are more of the mind, when it comes to a visualization, like what are some cues or some of things like examples that you use to help guys, whether it's hitters, pitchers, guys in the weight room, like what are some things that you have those conversations with?
Well, it's funny you bring that up because honestly, it's probably the last thing that we ever talk about from a hitting standpoint because they're always worried mechanics, timing, all the other stuff, which is important. But we always forget how important just the mind is. And we talk about it all the time. You've got to train your mind just like you train your body, where your visualization, your thoughts, you're seeing things happen before these things are happening maybe that night in your game or the next day. If you really watch into Russell Wilson, the quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks, he has a mental coach basically that talks about this visualization. And I mean, I don't know if it's coincidence or not, but his fourth quarter comes around and he's got almost more fourth quarter victories where he comes from behind than any other quarterback since he's been in the league. And he talks about this in the detail of he sees things happen the day before, the week before. So when that moment comes, he's ready for it. He's not shocked and caught off guard by it. A player I played with when I was at the White Sox organization, he introduced me to a book called The Mind Gym. Mm-hmm. Mind Gym, MIND. Go out there, guys, if you're listening to this, and I highly suggest you find it. It was written by a sports psychologist. He actually passed away a couple of years ago. I think he used to work for the Seattle Mariners, and he was based out of Arizona. But he would come in and basically teach these athletes like Alex Rodriguez, King Griffey, or two of the guys he used for an example, how to have visualization success and seeing things before they're happening, whether it's the bat before, the night before, that this guy's got a really good breaking ball, and in this certain count, I'm going to literally close my eyes and try to visualize myself making good contact with this breaking ball when he throws it to me. And some people will look at you like you're crazy, like, man, what is this, some voodoo stuff you're trying to pull? But it honestly is such an important aspect of just seeing the positives before they happen to you, so you can almost attract it to you. I'm a big believer in law of attraction, and the more you think positive and put positive things out there, I'm a big believer you're going to get positive results coming back to you. So honestly, I tell guys to sit down at night. Before seasons is a big part. Hey, write down your goals, visualization, write down your goals, put them on your door so you can see these things every single day. Whether it's, I want to bat 350 this year with 5 home runs and 25 RBIs and 20 stolen bases. Like, write these things down so you can visualize and see this every single day. Same thing if you're in the weight room of, I want to squat 450. Well, the more you continue to see it and feed it through your brain, the more you're actually going to continue to work to it. It's not going to just come up by surprise. And it also gives you goals to reach, to shoot for. Like, hey, I know I'm in a situation. I need to have a really big night at the plate. Not that you put extra pressure on yourself, but maybe you're a little bit more locked in because you're trying to reach a certain goal. So I would first make preseason goals. And then during the week, say you play 2 games a week, make weekly goals that you have going. And then when it comes down to it, if you're playing more college where it's 4 to 5 days a week, you're having daily goals, or, hey, these are my in-conference game goals. These are my out-of-conference game goals. And I think that's such a big part. And I took this into, I think it was my junior year at South when I was just transferring in. I looked up kind of the 3 top performers from the year before in Division I baseball that were outfielders, mainly center fielders. So looking for average on base percentage, speed, some power, extra base hits mixed in there. And I kind of just wrote down what I was shooting for that year. And it was funny because I literally wrote down in my goal that I wanted to hit 410, and I finished up at 390. And was I disappointed? Yes. But at the same time, you look, you're like, dang, I was freaking close to nailing my goals there. Now, one that was a little shorter was home runs things, but I wasn't much of a home run hitter at the time. But every other thing I really tried to compare up to these guys and try to challenge and follow in their footsteps. And so that was another thing that it's just very simple and easy to do this, but it often gets overlooked. And it takes 5 minutes a day to do this stuff. When you first wake up in the morning, before games, I know some guys will talk about that they're taking pregame naps. Basically, they just close their eyes, lay down on the ground for 10 minutes, just kind of visualizing what's about to happen tonight and that picture you're about to face. And it's just, the more you dive into it and you start to learn that people do this way more often than what you think. I mean, the Navy SEALs talk about it all the time, how important it is for mind training. And it's so much mental versus just the physical aspect. Because if it was physical, we would all be able to get through it. But it's the ones that are weakly minded that can't get through the stuff that they need to get through. So that's kind of my perspective on all the mental training stuff. What's some things you like to do and recommend with your hitters and with all of your players and athletes?
Absolutely. So when it comes to the visualization, I will say with everybody that I talk to, it's always the older guys. It's the junior, seniors in high school, and then the college guys as well. I need to talk about it more with younger guys, and I touch on it a little bit, but this is basically my go-to. And I always tell kids, like, hey, what you see is what you believe. And that is what you literally see. And is also what you're seeing inside your head. And I always give 2 examples, and especially when I'm talking about like hitting, when it comes to like sliders, curveballs, off-speed pitches, my first 2 years, and as you know, Adam, like my first couple of years at South, I struggled a lot with seeing the slider up. And so as a righty, like I never really saw sliders. I know my freshman year, it was like 3 weeks until I got my first AB of the season or something like that. And then I was kind of righty-lefty matchup a lot. So I didn't really see it as much. And then as I got more comfortable and as I got understanding, like, hey, this is something I need to really improve, because in my mind, I could hit any fastball that was coming my way. And so there's kind of 2 ways I went about this. After my sophomore year, and I had a good year, hit over 300. But I had too many strikeouts, and the strikeouts weren't even necessarily like good strikeouts. What I mean by good strikeout, like, you know, I was swinging at pitches that were out of the zone. Those were bad strikeouts. And so I always talk about guys, like, if you are seeing pitches and you don't have the confidence in hitting them, number one, you have to practice those. You're not gonna get better at what you don't practice. And number 2, you have to visually see yourself hitting the ball. And so, like, I had to sit down at night, and I would sit there and I'd run through in my head, close my eyes as I'm doing right now. And I'd sit there and I'd look at those sliders that I would miss. And I would try to recognize when the spin happened, where the pitch was released out of the hand. And I would sit there and focus on it, focus on those bad pitches, but also at the same time, focus on the ones that I did see that were up. And the ones that I saw that were up, I visualized myself keeping my front shoulder on and driving the baseball to the opposite field in the gap. Maybe it's a one-hopper off the wall. Maybe it's a line drive down the right field line. And then also I visualize myself laying off those pitches in the dirt. And by the time my junior and senior comes around, doing that on top of sitting and standing inside of bullpens and tracking pitches, and just really, especially like when other guys were hitting when we were doing live on the field, if I was back there in the back, I was sitting there and I was watching and tracking and just kind of seeing the ball and trying to see as much spin as I could. And looking back on it, on what I know now, I could have helped myself so much better than what I was back then. Because there's so many things when it comes to actually practicing the sliders, actually working on things that I'm weak at, actually helping my mechanical flaws. But I sat there and I would visualize myself achieving those. The second way I talk about it with hitting, and to me, this is the most important part, is if my swing was off, if I had some top spin on the ball, I would visualize myself hitting a ball with backspin in the right center field gap or the left center field gap. I would visualize myself as this pitcher was throwing when I was getting my timing down. Because there's a lot of kids that when they're on the on deck circle and they're in the hole, they're watching the pitcher or they're looking out in the crowd. They're not really working on their timing. And there's really two parts of timing for me. There's getting the foot down, but there's also getting the foot down and visually seeing yourself hitting a line drive. So if I'm watching this pitcher, not only am I working on my time with him, but I'm visually seeing myself pretending that I'm hitting a laser in the gap, or I'm hitting a laser, whatever I need to focus on for that certain pitcher, whatever his tools are, I'm going to combat those tools with a different approach. And so there's a lot of things that I would sit there and visualize. And this is something I did when I was younger. When I was boxing, I did it in basketball. Like when I was shooting free throws, I would do my 3 dribbles and get in my rhythm, get in my same routine. And then I would see myself getting a good release. And I was taking my jump shot from the free throw line. But I would visually see it. And I do this with everything in life. I did it with a job. Like I remember when I got done playing and I wanted to be a strength coach at a high school, I was like, I'm going to be a strength coach at this high school. And I kept saying it to myself. And when the availability came open, which was like 2 years into, I think I was done, I went in, interviewed for the job, and got the job. I visually see myself doing it. The same thing with Laird's training. I visually see where I want to be in 2-3 years. I write down my objectives. I write down the goals I want to have. And I'm focusing on the end goal, but I'm focusing on the process most importantly about how I need to get to that end goal. And I'm visualizing myself like, hey, this is where I want to be. This is what I've got to do. And on social media, people will, like young athletes will see stuff and they see all the the glory. Like Alabama just won national championship. And people don't understand that amount of effort and the work that comes in. And Nick Saban talks about all the time about buying into the process and doing your job. There's very, 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 very few athletes that can get away with not putting in 100%. And it's the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. And even then, once those guys get to the highest of levels, when they're facing people on their same talent and same skill, they're most likely going to sink when they're not prepared. And the thing is about Alabama is I guarantee they talk about visualization. I guarantee they talk about the process of what they need to do day in and day out. And I've heard some things that Saban says, and there's a reason why he's one of the best coaches of all time in college football, because the visualization, the mental toughness, the mental awareness that he teaches that these guys need to have, that's something that will carry on in all aspects of their life, but it's something that he reinforces with all of his athletes. And I'm a big fan of that stuff. I'm a big fan of the accountability. Like, hey, if you see yourself, failing at something, if you're struggling with something and you just kind of give up or you shudder to it or you don't want to work on it, hey, it starts with that mental toughness 101, that visualization of seeing that you can do it. Because you got to believe in your head first that you can do something before you actually act on it. If you're insecure about it, you don't really believe in yourself to do it, like in your head, acting on it's not going to help. So I kind of touch on all those things and really go into that. A lot of it's about seeing pitches, recognizing pitches, and having the confidence they can get it. Because I had a kid, this was like 2 or 3 months ago, that said he couldn't hit outside pitches. Like, dude, why do you think that? Because he just didn't have any confidence in doing it. He had a coach tell him one time he couldn't do it. He struggled with it in BP. I go, dude, you got to believe that you could do it first. You got to see yourself doing it first before you actually execute it. Nobody out just randomly does something and it's like, oh, poof, it's perfect now. You got to sit there and think, how am I going to do this? This is what I need to do. All right, I'm going to visualize myself doing it, and I'm going to achieve it. So it's a lot of stuff that I like. I could talk about this stuff for hours because I've done it with so many things. I've done it as a dad. I make a mistake and I visualize how I'm going to handle a situation in the future. That's something that I've done a lot lately. I'm obviously my hardest critic. I always feel like I could handle something better. But for the listeners here, like that's when you make a mistake, that's the time to start visualization. How are you going to handle that situation better in the next time? see yourself doing it the right way. And then once that opportunity comes, the next time that situation comes, boom, you've already seen yourself do it and you execute.
Exactly. I mean, you have to believe it to see it. And that's ultimately what it all comes down to. And a good thing I like to tell with my young athletes as well is like in that 13 or 14 or 15-year-old, and you're having aspirations of you want to play college baseball, as I tell guys, is write down 5 schools that you want to go to, your 5 dream schools. I don't care if it's Vanderbilt, if it's Alabama, whatever it is, just write down your 5 dream schools. And then in your next section, you have 10, maybe within a 3 to 4 hour kind of area of where you live at, more local schools. And then you kind of just start to visualize yourself playing at these schools. Start doing research on this baseball program or what classes do they offer at this school that I'd be interested in. And before you know it, just by you researching that stuff and looking at your program in your brain of this is what ultimately what I want to do, and this is going to help me get there. So visualization and mental training is such a big part of the process. But like I mentioned earlier, it's one that often gets overlooked because people claim they don't either have time for it or that it doesn't work. And they're so easy to give up on it right away. And I promise you, if you just add this to your routine each and every day, and it's just 5 minutes, and it's 5 minutes of adding this into your routine, I think you're going to see some big changes happening in your game, both on the field and off the field too.
Absolutely. And just like you said, it only takes 5 minutes, and it's just like everything in life. Like when you show up for 2 HIIT lessons, it's not working, you don't quit. I mean, there's some people that are weak and they quit, but mental training is something you got to do every single day. Like take that 5 minutes. What did you do wrong that day? Visualize yourself doing it right and how to do it right. If you don't know, ask somebody, ask a mentor, have a mentor help you, guide you through the process of how things should be approached, and then visualize yourself doing it, and then you execute. But I really like that. That's a really good topic for guys to kind of carry into their day-to-day life and day in and day out activities.
Do you have any book recommendations? I know I mentioned the Mind Gym, but do you have any that you would recommend for athletes to start reading?
So I'm actually in front. I'm next to my my bookshelf right now as we're talking. Relentless by Tim Grover is a really good one. I actually started reading this a while ago, and I'm not completely done with it. But this is something where he talks about Kobe Bryant has a quote in there. He talks about training Michael Jordan. And he was actually in The Last Dance. If people don't know that, he was on there getting an interview for The Last Dance. That's something I really recommend, highly recommend. There's a lot of, I like fighting books. I like reading into the confidence that fighters have, like MMA fighters and boxers. For me, those guys are the guys that do it for a long period of time. They're the most mentally tough guys in the world because they physically, not only do they mentally get beat, but they physically get destroyed by somebody in the fight game. Like Conor McGregor, for instance. I love the confidence that he has. People see it as arrogance. I personally, I think that fighters have to have that type of attitude, but he got choked out by Nate Diaz. All he does is he goes and trains and he wins by decision in his next fight. And he picked up that fight at 170 last second. Nate's the bigger, stronger guy. He got beat. He learned from it. I guarantee he was using mental training to train himself to see how he was going to do that. And he if you listen to him talk, you listen to a lot of fighters talk, they say exactly how they're going to execute their fight plan. And then they go out and do it. Just like Tyson Fury against Deontay Wilder. He literally told Deontay what he was going to do for weeks leading up to fight. And he shows up and I was like, no, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. I remember talking to Matt Rada, who was the coach at Alabama at the time. And I know he's from Tuscaloosa. And he was like, oh, dude, Deontay's going to kill him. I go, no, dude, Fury's going to give him a boxing lesson. I don't know if he's going to knock him out like he says he's going to, but I saw what I saw in the first fight. And again, those guys, they go through so many sparring sessions, so many sessions where they get the crap kicked out of them. And he's a perfect example. He's a guy that fought depression, and Tyson Fury thought about killing himself. Mm-hmm. And he literally lifted himself up from almost near the grave of wanting to kill himself and drive himself off a bridge to become the heavyweight champion of the world again. There's so much that we can learn from guys like that, people that have been through a lot. And you mentioned, Navy SEALs and Marines. Those guys can talk about mental toughness and what mentally got them through things. The ultimate book that I would recommend would be Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. That is the ultimate. I read that, it was 2 years ago on spring break, I think, or a year and a half ago or something like that. His book on Can't Hurt Me talks about so many. He saw, I don't want to ruin a couple of things, so I won't mention what I was getting ready to say, but he saw so many awful things and experienced so many awful things before he was a grown man that would break most people. And he talks about the mental toughness to be able to execute and get out of those things and embracing the suck and embracing things that are hard in life. And that's ultimately going to make you the stronger man at the end. So I would highly recommend that that Relentless book, From Good to Great to Unstoppable, and Can't Hurt Me from Goggins. And obviously anything that any fighters will talk about, the mental game. You listen to interviews from those guys. There's a lot of good gold nuggets that you can get from those guys for sure.
Yeah, those are great recommendations right there. So we'll definitely have to check those out. I'm going to tee you up here, Sean. This is something that's very serious that we have talks with about all the time. And it's about bullying. And a guy your size and your stature, I'd highly doubt you were ever bullied before. But maybe there was back when the day, you never know. But what are some things, I guess, that you do to help your athletes kind of get through the situation? And kind of what's your whole view on the whole bullying going on?
So this might be long-winded. I have no idea, but I was always a bigger, stronger, faster guy. I was skinny. I was a buck 65 when I was a freshman in high school. When I was in high school, I had developed a reputation halfway through the year, and I didn't really get messed with. I got into a fight halfway through my freshman year. There was a senior who was in the freshman class. He was picking on a freshman, a little guy, and I called him out for it. And he came up and took a swing at me, and I just defended myself. And handled it. But I'm going to sit here and I'm going to tell you guys, bullying is the most overused term, I think, today, excluding, I'm not going to get into politics. So I won't even talk about that, but excluding certain words I won't discuss today. But bullying is real, 100% real. People go through this day in and day out. There are people that kill themselves over this. There are people that don't want to live. There are people that don't want to go to school. There are people that don't want to experience sports. It's 100% real. But I guess I want to start with, I'll go back to me and fighting and stuff later, because I don't want to set a bad example. I want people to understand what I meant by that, and I'll circle back around. But if you are a very insecure person and you have your buddies and your friends around and you're getting, made fun of and stuff like that, that's just banter. That's having fun with your buddies. You're hanging out. You got to understand the difference between your own insecurities and actual bullying. And I guess for my opinion on what bullying is something that happens on a daily basis or almost daily basis, something that's consistent, somebody that's constantly trying to bring you down, somebody that's verbally abusing you or physically abusing you. Because the verbal abuse, calling somebody names, maybe making fun of their mom, if their mom or dad, maybe, somebody is in prison or somebody has been through drug issues or whatever, gets out in the open and people sort of, verbally abusing a kid like that could be very mentally draining. And that's mental abuse. And there's the physical part where people are kicking kids down the hallway, throwing books on the ground, whether it's in school or whatever. And I will say this, like most of the stuff that you guys will see, the people who are listening that you'll see on TV, doesn't really happen very often. There is stuff that happens, and you'll see stuff on social media. There's a lot of things that are absolutely real, but the way they portray it on TV where it happens, like this is crazy. The weak kid gets picked on by the big alpha male, or the hot cheerleader that's real popular picks on other girls. Like, yes, that happens, but it's not like you can't categorize certain people for being certain things. Like I got categorized as a jock and an athlete, and teachers thought I was dumb. Immediately they took, I'm not going to say this woe is me, but there was a lot of experiences that I had in my life where people judged me before they even knew me. So I want to make sure I stress that most importantly right now. I was never a bully. At least I hope that people never viewed me as that. I always saw myself as defending the weak or defending the vulnerable. If I saw something like that example I was mentioned before, I didn't want to get into a physical confrontation with this person, but I saw somebody bullying somebody and I felt like it was my job to help that kid. Now, do I mess around with people and I joke around with people? 100%. But those are my friends. So I guess I kind of want to touch on about what is the difference, like how do you handle certain things? And I will approach with, if somebody is physically harming you, and this is, people might not like this when they hear this, but if somebody's physically trying to hurt you and harm you on a daily basis, you have to defend yourself. And you're never going to get respect from that bully, and you're never going to be able to withhold or prevent that person from doing it in the future unless you physically defend yourself. You can't allow somebody to smack you. You can't allow somebody to hit you in front of other people. You don't want them to put you down in front of others, because most people will sit here and say violence is not the answer. And I'm going to tell you, yes, violence isn't the answer, but I'm going to be blunt right here. We got 2 world wars that'll prove that notion wrong. Sometimes you have to physically defend yourself. And I'll tell my kids this, and I was like this the whole way. I would never start a fight But if somebody physically attacks you, it's just like somebody steps inside your home. You have to defend your family, especially as men. And I raise and teach young men how to be men all the time. And if somebody's giving you shit, you don't take any. But at the same time, if you're going to defend yourself, you got to understand what you're getting yourself into. So there's a lot of guys that will sit there and they'll shudder because they're afraid of getting into a fight, or they're afraid of defending themselves. And like I said before, you don't have to get into a fight, but you just need to stand up to them. If somebody's trying to physically harm you, you need to call them out for it. You need to, walk right up to them and have a conversation with them and be blunt about it. I'm not going to sit here and give you some fake idealist notions of how to handle things, but the best example I can give you is when I was in 6th grade. So I was always bigger. I was talking about this before. I was always bigger, faster, stronger. There was an 8th grader. I don't know why. I vaguely remember this. I was walking after school downtown to the YMCA, and this 8th grader had his buddies around, and he was joking around and kind of running his mouth a little bit. And he went up and tried to pick me up and body slam me. And meanwhile, I have no idea how big I was in 6th grade, but this kid was 2 years older than me. And he was like probably 6'2", 6'3", which seemed like at the time ginormous. Luckily, I had a background in defending myself. And so I knew how to defend myself, and he was trying to pick me up. He was literally trying to pick me up and body slam me. So I grabbed his leg, prevented it from happening. And we scuffled around and got through everything. And it got broke up by a bunch of people. But at the end of the day, I defended myself. I didn't allow that guy to pick me up and bully me in front of all these other people on the way home, on the way to the YMCA from school. And I don't even know if I told my dad about that when that happened, because it was after school. We're walking, and way we lived in Kokomo is my middle school was like maybe a half mile or maybe 3/4 of a mile away from the Y. So I used to do it all the time. I'd go over there to go either lift or play basketball or go do something with buddies afterward. But going back to that, like I had boxed when I was younger, so I had confidence in that. I was an athlete, so I had no problem of physically defending myself. So for the people that are listening here, I highly advise even the kids that, like, from the parents' perspective, parents won't involve kids in athletics. Most kids don't want to do athletics, but you have to train your body just as much as you train your mind. And this is, most people don't agree with this stuff, and I understand that when I'm saying it right now. But if you go through life not being able to defend yourself, sooner or later you're going to be in a situation where somebody's going to try to take advantage of you, and you want to be able to defend yourself. Like back in the day, like obviously we live in 2021. It's different nowadays. I could get in fights when I was younger and I was a kid defending myself, and maybe I'd get a day of in-school suspension or something like that. It's different now. But I guarantee that if you are attacked and you are just trying to defend yourself from a bully, if you are reprimanded in any way, it's going to be light. And if it's not light, obviously that will be taken care of by your parents in the future. That's just a couple examples of the physical bullying and stuff that I kind of went through growing up. And I'll give some examples after I kind of get your feedback on this of what I give advice for certain guys when it comes to the mental part of it too. But kind of what's some experience for you, Adam?
Yeah, so like back in high school and stuff, I mean, I was never the biggest or anything like that. So I don't remember specifically being bullied at all, just because I was an athlete that kind of had a group of friends around. Now, did I notice some of my friends bullying people that, looking back now, I wish I would have stepped up and said something like, dude, that's not cool. There's plenty of times I wish I would have did that. And I think the more mature I got throughout the whole situation was just because a lot of the ones that were bullying people are the most insecure ones, but they want to prove to their friends or that group that they're with that they're bigger and badder than everybody else. So they're going to do it on their own. But I think you answered it perfectly in the fact that you got to defend yourself. And every parent I interact with, like if I've heard of a altercation or a fight or something going on with their child involved, like, and if their son, and they've all agreed the same thing, is like, if you're getting continuously picked on by this person, if you don't defend yourself, it's never going to change, unfortunately. And so whether it's you step up and you say something, you push them back, maybe you take a few hits, whatever it is, and you get in trouble for it. But I promise you, you're going to feel better about yourself for stepping up and making something happen, and it won't continue to happen anymore. And you might surprise yourself. You might be like, I didn't know I had that inside of me. But when you get that stuff built up for so long, there's some rage that will come out into you. So if it's continue to happen, you have to try to do something about it and try to take care of it yourself before you get your parents or your coaches or teachers or anything like that involved, just to see where everything is at. And obviously, if it's continuing and it's going down a bad path, then you have to get some adults involved. Now, one specific situation I know that has happened, and it's been inside the facility. So 2 kids went to the same middle school at the time. One was 8th grade, one was 6th grade. And we had this one athlete, and they both have been coming in for a while. One is he's getting his work on, and all of a sudden, this is the younger kid, the sixth grader, physically, like, as the other kid walks in the door, they've never seen each other inside the facility before, and like froze instantly. And so right away, like, it was like a red flag, like, what's going on here? Why did everything just change? Your body language, your actions, you're not even talking. And then luckily later on, we kind of went to the backs to do some workout stuff. And he had mentioned to the coach that kid constantly bullies me at the school I go to. And so we kind of asked him, like, hey, what all does he do? And he talks about knocking his books down, trying to put him in the trash can, trying to do all these certain things. And we've asked if he's tried to do anything by himself. And he says he has, but he won't continue to stop. So in that situation, me and the coaches kind of went out of our way to kind of take care of it for him. So the next time the eighth grader came in, he was by himself. He didn't do a lesson that day. He worked out for about an hour straight, and it was sled pushes. It was tennis ball pickups, a lot of stuff. And he had no idea what was going on. And so towards the end, we mentioned, hey, do you know this kid? And you can see it on his face, like he's about to lie to you. So straight up say, no, I don't know him. And well, yes, you do. We know that you know him. And so we basically got it out of him. He said he does it at school. After that workout, basically said he'll never do it again. He stopped. And from there on out, there was never any issue ever again. And I remember the younger kid coming in like, Coach, did y'all say anything to him? Because he doesn't do it to me anymore. And we was like, no, it probably just took care of itself. But that's when the parents and the coaches and other stuff have to get involved. It was when it doesn't stop. So it was a cool situation for both of them, such a learning experience of the bully and then the one getting bullied being in the same circumstance. And looking back now, if they would have never been in there at the same time, like it could still be going on to this day. So I think it was God's way of saying, hey, somebody's got to step in to handle this. And it's not going to be the parents or the teachers or anything like that. This is where, once again, we're not just baseball coaches, where we got our point across to him that bullying is not cool. And it's not cool to constantly do it to ones that are weaker than you, whether it's physically, mentally, anything that you see. Somebody may have a problem and you're picking on them. That is not okay. And it's not going to be okay throughout life. And you're going to find out very quickly right there. But just as you were talking, there was just some instances popped up, and I just remember that one stuck out like a sore thumb. And I think more than anything, guys that are listening to this podcast, and you mentioned it, is jocks. We kind of, if you play athletic sports, you're going to get labeled a jock. You're going to get labeled dumb. You're going to get labeled all this other stuff, nonsense that isn't true. And now, if you buy into the hype and think you can just rule the world because you do play baseball at your school or you do play football, whatever it is, you're going to get leveled really quick eventually one day, whether it's your coach that does it for you or the next coach that coaches you in college does it for you. That is not going to be okay. And I think looking back now, more than anything, is if you're maybe a male figure that has – maybe you're quiet, you don't like to step up and say stuff. Like we have talked about on a podcast before, step up. It was on our leadership podcast. If you've never done this before, try it. And you will have the whole locker room take over. And if you see something going on that you do not like or you know that is not right, step up and say something and interfere and protect somebody. And I promise you, you're going to feel so much better about yourself if you go ahead and take that route there.
Yep. And that's a great example of when it is the right time as a coach or a mentor to step in to prevent that from happening. Because the best advice I could give a young athlete or a person listening to this to prevent bullying is you need to handle it yourself. There is certain times when you might need some help in that situation. Like if you've tried to defend yourself and you tried it before and it continues, that's when you obviously approach somebody and talk to somebody about it. Now, from my experience, when it comes to defending yourself from a physical standpoint, like people always talk about bullying and they talk about, hey, bullying awareness and do this and do that. And those same people talk about, nonviolence and don't get into a fight. I'm a firm believer. You punch a bully in the mouth, 99% of the time, that dude's not going to try to come back at you anymore.
Nope.
People are going to listen to this and not liking that, but I'm speaking from the school of hard knocks and from exact experience. I can mention a ton of times growing up and like I talk about my childhood a lot. It was not easy. And every single time that I defended myself or I came into a situation, because like I said before, there's always somebody that's going to try you, whether, you're a guy like me or you're a young guy and you seem weak or vulnerable, like people talk about in prison all the time. They go after and attack the weak. And there is a reason why they do that, because they're going to get away with it. If you stand up for yourself, whether you win the fight or lose the fight, that doesn't matter. That person's like, this guy's he's too much trouble to mess with. He's too much trouble to deal with. Now let's talk about the mental side of it, of somebody calling you names and attacking you. There's situations that have happened in the past in the weight room. Back when I was at Westfield High School, and obviously with Laird's training, where some kids are physically behind. Or they're obviously, maybe they're, mentally behind, the cognitive function isn't there. The motor skills aren't developed yet. And they kind of make fun of them a little bit. And there's definitely some banter. It's okay. And I was talking about before, like, as a listener here, you have to develop thick skin. Like me and Adam deal with trolls on social media. We deal with people that say negative things about the business. I approach things like when I see that person, when somebody says something, hey, this guy said something negative about you. I go, well, he wouldn't say it to my face. I don't care what he said. That's my approach to it. And I don't care what they say. I don't take it seriously, because it's that guy. I don't respect his opinion. I don't respect him. So I'm not going to listen to his opinion. So this is where I get into an example of, I have a kid, or had a kid, this was years ago, did really well in school. The reason he did well in school is because he read all the time. He studied all the time. He wasn't a guy that could just sit down and listen in class and get all A's and stuff, but he was a guy that had to work hard. And his dad did a great example of teaching him to work hard and get good grades. He had a certain amount of buddies. And this took a while for him to kind of admit to me, but on the weekends, his buddies would go out and drink. They go out and do things. And he mentioned to me about them, like, kind of making fun of him about it, calling him names, saying certain things about him, questioning his manhood, things like that. And I basically he's like, man, it's just, they're my friends. They act cool when they're with me one-on-one, but then when they're in a group, they start attacking me. And that's, people are listening, like, bullies will do it in a group. Very rarely in a one-on-one situation will you see a bully do that. If it is in a one-on-one situation, you still handle it exactly how me and Adam are telling you to handle it. But most of the time they do it because they're wanting to get people to laugh. They're wanting to make themselves feel better. And that's one thing. And I talk about this all the time about false confidence and true confidence. And I would love to do a podcast. We should do one here in the future about real confidence. I think we should touch on that in the future, about what real true confidence is versus false confidence. But most of the bullies, 99% of bullies, I say 99% because there is the 1% that are just dicks and they want to get a rise out of people. They're still trying to do it for some reason. You could break it down from a psychology standpoint, but 99% of bullies, they're doing it to deflect. They're doing it because they're insecure about something. They're doing it because they want to feel accepted. The only way they feel accepted is to pick on people that are weaker than them. So long story short, I gave that kid advice. I go, listen, do you think you're going to be friends with these guys 5-10 years down the road? He goes, I don't know. I go, I'm going to tell you right now, no. And the reason I'm telling you no right now is because you got your head on straight. You're getting good grades. You're a good athlete. Are any of those other guys good athletes? And he goes, yeah, a couple of them are. And I go, well, how are their grades? And he goes, they're not very good. I go, well, right there, you've already won. I go, when high school gets over with, those guys are going to be so far behind because you're going to get to the real world. You're going to get to college. You're going to be playing on the field and you're going to get it done in the classroom. If those guys are lucky enough to play at the next level and they're not getting their grades, they're going to get booted. As you and I saw all the time, guys that had a lot of talent and they didn't get their grades and they got booted from the team. I go, at the end of the day, how important is those guys' opinions of you? He goes, it doesn't really matter. I'm still going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I go, well, I'm going to tell you right now, because they're trying to bring you down and they're trying to talk you out of, studying for this test or doing these certain things and trying to tell you need to be drinking and going out and doing these things at parties that you don't want to do. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. And you need to find yourself a new group of friends. You need to be comfortable with that and tell them off, like be straightforward with them. Because he was worried about losing them as friends and not wanting to be upfront and exactly tell them. And he would be in certain situations where he felt peer pressure. And I go, dude, listen, just tell him straight up, like, I'm not going to do this stuff. Say, dude, I like you as your friend. You're a good dude and everything, but I just can't do that stuff. And you'd be surprised, like being honest with somebody, if they're truly a friend, they'll listen to you and go, hey man, I'm sorry. I won't ask anymore. Or they'll learn to not try to pressure you into those things. And if they respond negatively and they start calling you more names, then you need to cut that dude out of your life, period. Because that's not a true friend. That's not somebody that looks out for your well-being. It's somebody that's in it for themselves. And they want to feel cool. They want to feel more accepted to make you do it. Because if you're doing it, it makes them feel better about themselves doing it. And we could talk about drugs and stuff like that all the time. I never was a drug guy, never was an alcohol guy. I have a few adult beverages every now and then, but I'm not a guy that, tries to hammer it down and get drunk. And especially from that young, high schoolers will try to do it. Obviously, I just don't advise of leaning on anything as a young man or a young woman trying to create something for you to lean on. Like, don't go out and go get drunk when you turn 21 because you think you're supposed to get drunk when you turn 21. If you don't want to, don't do it. If you want to and experience it, great. Have a good time, but be responsible. Don't let anybody pressure you into doing something you don't want to do. Because at the end of the day, nobody's going to defend yourself but you. And this is when I come back to the bullying thing. Like, that kid, he ended up telling this stuff, and within about 2 or 3 weeks, he said, "Man, I'm so glad I had those conversations." And I think a couple of the kids, I think if I remember right, he cut them out of his life, and he had 1 or 2 guys that he's still friends with, I believe, to this day, because every now and then I'll see him on social media. I would assume that everything went pretty well, but he just appreciated the conversation, because most of the time, as a mentor, you just listen, and you listen to what he has to say. You ask questions, and he's kind of has the answer in his own head, but he just needs your affirmation if that's the right answer to kind of follow through with it. And he knew he needed to cut certain guys out, and he knew he needed to be blunt and approach them a certain way, and he did that. So don't let other people kind of press you into situations and things you don't want to do. Don't let them verbally abuse you. You need to stand up for yourself, because if, like I said before, if you allow somebody to say things about you, other people are going to jump in on it. When other people jump in on it, that's going to affect your confidence. It's going to affect who you are. It's going to affect what you think of yourself. Even though your presentation doesn't show exactly who you are, people are going to believe what they want to believe. So if you see somebody trying to bring you down and talk you down and, say negative things about your name, you need to stop it.
Yeah, and most importantly, just be you and be different, if that's okay. I mean, I think a lot of kids get caught up into, if I play baseball, I have to hang out with just baseball players. That's not necessarily true. Just hang out who you want to hang out with and who are good influences for you. That's most importantly, the more people you hang out with, that's what your attitude and what you're going to be like in the long run. So if you're constantly around negative people, you're going to end up developing being a negative person in the world. So the more important you surround yourself with good quality people, the better off this is all going to be there. So I'm glad that you were able to hit on that. And going back to our leadership one that we did earlier in the year, it's the ones that are different, that are willing to do the opposite of everybody else, is usually the ones that will rise to the top and prevail. So for that standpoint, that kid there, that there's no telling what path he would have went down if he just constantly kept hanging with these guys just because they were his cool kid friends. He may have never even made it to college, played in college, whatever it is from that standpoint. So I'm glad that you were able, and you hit a big spot too of being a mentor, is listen. I don't think not enough people listen these days. They always want to shoot out the right answer right away instead of fully intaking every little counter intuitive thing that you're going to have to say. So if somebody's coming to you, listen to what's being said out of their mouth and then add your input with it. What you say is not end all be all, but they're going to respect your opinion if you let them kind of put everything out there, way more than if you just blurt in with, hey, you need to try this. And then, all right, go ahead and get on your way and get out of here. So that's a cool thing. One thing I want to bring up before we get off is, so this week I had my first time, a college player contacted me. It was after a practice he had on Monday, I believe. Yeah. And he's in a bad situation. You can just tell mentally he wasn't all there. And they're showing favoritism to another guy that plays the same position. And I've been around this kid for 3 years now, and I know how hard he works. He's an extremely hard worker. And he honestly gets made fun of because he works so hard. He's different. At practice, they're always, why do you do the extra stuff? Why do you do the foam roller, the J bands, and all that other stuff? And he's kind of like an outcast there because he works so hard. He calls me, he doesn't know what to do. And so a big piece of advice, and we've talked about it before, is when we step up and be leaders and talk to our coaches. That was my main thing I told him, was go talk to your coach. And right away he's like, man, I don't want to do that. I've never done it before. And I told him I've done it 3 separate times in my life, and all 3 times the turnout was amazing. Like, it was just, you're free. You don't feel like you have anything on your stomach anymore. Everything's out in the open. And sometimes that coach doesn't know what's going on. So he has this conversation with his coach, and right away the coach says, he's like, I'm glad you came and talked to me, because I have to treat that other player like I do because he needs it. He lacks confidence. So I have to almost build him up more. And he goes, I'm never making fun of you for anything that you do. He said, because he missed out on, they were doing bunt coverages. This one guy got all the reps except the last one. And the coach fully owned it. He's like, look, that was my mistake. I was focused on our other infielders doing certain things that I forgot to get you in that situation. It won't happen again. He said, but as far as, he goes, look, I know I don't have to baby you. You work hard on your own. You don't suck up to the coach. You're not one of those guys. You're literally not an outcast, like in a bad way, but you're a guy that everybody wants to be like. And that's what struck the biggest nerve to him, was he had never looked at it that way. He always thought he was working harder than everybody else, and everybody made fun of him for it. But why they're making fun of him is because they all want to be like that. They just don't know how. Yeah. And finally it clicked with him, and he's like, wow, I never thought of it like that. So he calls me the next day after he has this conversation. He's like, dude, I feel so clear now. Like, there's nothing on my brain. Like, I go to practice excited and ready to go. Like, I'm so glad he called me that night, because if he would have went through the whole season or halfway through the season fighting this little back and forth thinking, because you start playing stuff in your head. And that's what his whole conversation when he spoke to me that Monday night was like, man, he likes this guy better than me. I know he does. He does this, he does this, he does this. But he never got an answer why that coach does that maybe. And maybe it wasn't as bad as he thought he was seeing, but he started visualizing things and seeing things that really weren't even there in the first place. Yep. So just by him having this man-to-man conversation, and I told him, I said, look, text your coach, say, can we meet tomorrow one-on-one and just have a conversation? And he said the coach called him right away that night, like to try to check and see if everything's okay. And he's like, Coach, I'd just rather talk to you about it tomorrow. So instantly, like the coach had a red flag, like something's not right here. And this is one of my hardest workers. So I want to meet with him and talk to him. And just a cool thing that perspired because a kid took accountability of his career. Now he's going to get ready to start a season here in a couple of weeks, and it's going to be full steam ahead. He's got nothing to worry about. He knows where he stands with the coach. He knows the coach where he stands with him. Because after they left, he said, look, I'm going to encourage you two things. Go out of your way to be a better teammate. I mean, go out of your way, slap pitchers on the butt, whatever it is. Just go out of your way to be a better teammate and pick each other up, dap each other up. And he goes, I'm telling you, by the end of the season, you're going to be a leader that everybody rallies around. And so now that's kind of his goal this year is I want to be the leader, but leading by being on the field, doing stuff the right way, not by being the big rah-rah guy. And so it's going to be cool to see how that kind of transpires, and we'll keep updated with it and see where we're going. But I'm excited for him, and I was proud of him, man. It was like my own son that was able to go out there and do this. And trust me, whenever I did it my 3 times, I was scared as heck. I've never done this before. You always look at your coach like an intimidation factor. I don't want to say the wrong things. And the biggest thing that I told him more than anything was like, you have to be able to communicate with him. Don't come in the door and start attacking the coach. Just kind of communicate what you're feeling and where you're feeling, and then see where he takes the conversation. So that was one thing I wanted to bring up before we left, because I know we talk about it all the time. And I think some listeners that are listening to this maybe are, if they're fighting something like that, is notice we didn't mention parents were the ones talking to the coaches. This is your career, kids, whether you're 15 or whether you're 23, whatever it is, that if something is on your mind, you bring it up to the coach first. That way you can kind of know where you stand on things.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really great advice, because at the end of the day, communication is king. And like you said before, you're very insecure about this. You're really struggling. You don't want to have this conversation with the coach, or you don't want to have this conversation with a friend, or you don't want to have this conversation with a bully. Worst case scenario, right, is you're uncomfortable. And with a bully, maybe you end up getting into a different type of confrontation. But I'm going to tell you right now, the most important thing is for you to look in your mirror at the end of the night, respect the person that you look in the mirror, have confidence in the person that you're looking in the mirror with. But also, like, if you have things that are heavy on your heart and it's really weighing you down, those things are cancers. Those things can affect you mentally for a long time. Every time I've wanted to have a conversation that I knew was going to be troubling, or I knew that it was going to be confrontational, I didn't want to do it, but I knew that I had to do it. And usually, I'm going to tell you right now, every conversation that you don't want to have is a conversation that you do need to have, whether it's with a friend, your parent, a bully, your coach. If something is bothering you and weighing you down and preventing you from focusing on your day-to-day tasks, it's really hurting you from a mental perspective, you have to have those conversations. Now, the conversations are going to be completely different. Maybe you're approachable. Hey, why are you messing with me like this? What's the problem? And maybe he tells the truth, and maybe he doesn't. You have that conversation, you nip it in the bud. Coach, maybe you're feeling you're getting made fun of by a coach, and you don't understand why he's joking around about you that way. And you got to understand, maybe he's just trying to create banter. He's trying to have some fun, because there's a lot of kids that I know that we joke around and stuff. They have very thin skin. Like, you can say, all you got to do is say you messed up at something, and they think that you're attacking them like verbally, like, oh my God, I can't mess up. My mom said I'm the best player since Mike Trout. So you got to understand, like, having a conversation, understand where people come from, understanding, why people do the things that they do. Hey, coach, what did I do wrong here? Why did you get on me here? Or, hey, teacher, professor, whatever. Why did you answer my question completely different and negatively compared to this person? Why are you harder on me than other people? Those are conversations you need to have. And maybe you might think you're getting picked on at times. But if you kind of see the situation from the outside view, more often than not, you're going to feel so much better at the end of that conversation and being able to kind of conquer those fears and conquer what's in front of you. So guys, I really enjoyed this episode. It's a great episode today. If there's anything else you guys want us to touch on in the future when it comes to these couple topics of visualization and, bullying, give us a shout, shoot us a text, shoot us an email. We'll kind of touch on as much stuff as we can, and kind of go from there, man. And Adam, you got anything else before we roll out?
No, man, that's a lot of fun. So everybody go out there, subscribe, like, share, retweet, do all the above. Give us a good 5-star rating.
Absolutely, guys. And until next time, we'll see you guys later.